Imagine being just 13 years old and waking up to find that the people who were supposed to protect you had betrayed you in the most heartless way. What would you do if your own uncle, the only family you had left, sold you to the streets like you were nothing? But here's the twist. What happened after will leave you speechless. This is the story of Ayomide, a girl who refused to let her past define her and crafted a destiny no one saw coming. But how did she get here? And what happened to her cruel uncle? Stay with me as we unravel the truth. The sun set gently over the quiet village of Ilupeju, casting a warm golden hue over the modest house Ayomide shared with her uncle Femi. At just 13 years old, Ayomide carried dreams larger than life itself. Despite the loss of her parents in a tragic car accident 2 years earlier, she clung tightly to the hope of one day becoming a doctor, a promise she had whispered to her late mother's memory every night. Ayomide's brilliance in school only fueled her determination, and she often found solace in her books. But things were beginning to change. Femi, the man who had promised to care for her like his own, seemed colder with each passing day. What started as a soft distance grew into outright hostility. Gone were the days of shared meals and occasional laughter. Now he barked commands, criticized her every move, and seemed increasingly preoccupied with whispered conversations that abruptly stopped whenever Ayomide entered the room. Did he resent her? Was she a burden? Ayomide felt the questions gnawing at her, but she pushed them aside, hoping her uncle's mood swings would pass. However, the unease lingered, growing heavier when she overheard Femi arguing with a visitor late one night. "She's smart," the stranger said in a low voice. "She'll fetch a good price in the city." Femi's voice was muffled, his words unclear, but Ayomide's heart sank. A wave of panic surged through her, and her mind raced. Who were they talking about? The answer came the next morning, when Femi called Ayomide into the small sitting room. His tone was unusually pleasant, his face stretched into a forced smile. "Hey, yo," he said, using the affectionate nickname he hadn't uttered in weeks. "I have good news. Your Aunt Falake in Lagos has agreed to take you in. She says she'll send you to a good school and give you the life I can't provide here." Lagos, a better life? The promise was enticing, but Ayomide couldn't shake the unease in her stomach. She looked into Femi's eyes, searching for sincerity, but his gaze darted away too quickly. Still, what choice did she have? 2 days later, Ayomide packed her belongings, just a small bag of clothes and her treasured notebooks, and followed Femi to a waiting car. The driver, a wiry man with a permanent scowl, didn't speak as they drove away from the village, leaving everything Ayomide had ever known behind. Hours passed in silence until the car stopped abruptly in the heart of a chaotic urban market. Femi turned to Ayomide, avoiding her eyes, and muttered, "Wait here. Someone will come to take you to your aunt." Before she could respond, he was gone, disappearing into the crowd without so much as a backward glance. Minutes turned to hours, and no one came. Confused and increasingly scared, Ayomide clutched her bag tightly as unfamiliar faces leered at her. Then, as dusk settled over the bustling market, 2 men approached her. Their eyes were hard, their smiles cruel. "You're the girl Femi sent, right?" One of them asked, his tone more a statement than a question. Fear froze Ayomide's tongue as the men grabbed her arms, pulling her into a nearby alley. And that was the moment she realized the truth. Femi hadn't sent her to Aunt Falake. He had sold her. The betrayal was a sharp, unbearable pain that cut deeper than anything Ayomide had ever known. Her mind screamed questions. How could he do this? What did I do to deserve this? How will I survive? But as the men dragged her further into the shadows, one thought rose above all the fear and pain. I must find a way out. I must survive. Narrator: what would you do if the only person you trusted betrayed you so completely? Would you crumble, or would you fight to survive in a world determined to break you? Stay with us as Ayomide's story unfolds. The sun had barely risen when Ayomide's world crumbled. She stood on the bustling streets of Ibadan, clutching a small plastic bag containing her few belongings. Her uncle, Femi, had promised she would start a new life here. But as the hours passed and he didn't return, the truth began to sink in. She had been abandoned. The shock hit her like a wave. Why would he do this to me, she thought, her legs trembling beneath her. The sounds of the busy street, the shouts of market traders, the rumble of okadas, blurred into a deafening hum. She sank to the ground, her chest tightening as the realization dawned. She was alone, completely alone. Her stomach growled loudly, pulling her back to reality. Hours had passed, and she hadn't eaten since the night before. She ventured into the market, hoping to find scraps of food, only to be chased away by angry vendors. Her throat burned with thirst, but even the water sellers wouldn't spare a drop for free. What would you do in Ayomide's shoes? Would you keep fighting, or would despair take over? Night fell quickly, and with it came a new kind of terror. The streets transformed, becoming a playground for danger. Ayomide huddled in a corner, clutching her bag tightly as groups of men loitered nearby, their leering gazes sending chills down her spine. She prayed silently, hoping the shadows would swallow her whole. The next day, hunger and desperation pushed her to approach a group of street kids, hoping for help. They seemed friendly at first, offering her a piece of bread and a place to rest, but the kindness was a trap. Later that night, they tried to steal her belongings and leave her defenseless. Ayomide barely escaped, her bag ripped and her dignity shattered. It was then she met Toby's. He appeared out of nowhere, a wiry teenager with sharp eyes and an air of confidence that seemed out of place on the streets. "You'll get eaten alive if you keep trusting people like that," he said, pulling her out of the alley, where she had been hiding. Toby knew the streets like the back of his hand. He showed Ayomide how to scavenge for food, how to keep her few belongings safe, and, most importantly, how to blend in so she wouldn't attract unwanted attention. But his lessons came with a warning. "This place doesn't care about you, Ayomide," he said one evening as they sat under a bridge. "If you want to survive, you have to be smart. Don't trust anyone, not even me." His words stung, but Ayomide couldn't afford to ignore them. She learned quickly, adapting to her harsh new reality. Every day was a battle to find food, to avoid danger, to hold on to the faint hope that something better was waiting for her. But deep down, the question lingered. Would she ever escape this life? Or would the streets consume her, like so many others? What about you, dear viewer? Would you fight to survive or give up hope in such a cruel world? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. The sun burned fiercely on Ayomide's back as she crouched in a dusty corner of the bustling market. She had spent the past few days watching, carefully, silently. The older street vendors shouted and jostled for attention, while Ayomide, small and unnoticed, memorized the rhythms of their trade. Survival had demanded more from her than she ever thought she could give. One evening, after a brutal fight over scraps of bread, Ayomide made a decision. She would no longer rely on the mercy of others. She began gathering discarded plastic bottles and old wrappers, cleaning them and fashioning makeshift toys that she sold to parents passing through the market. It wasn't much, but it was hers. And somehow, her persistence seemed to anger the older vendors who tried to push her out of their territory. Ayomide didn't back down. She learned to smile at the right customers, offer the toys at just the right price, and stand her ground when others tried to intimidate her. Her small hands worked tirelessly, her mind racing to find new ways to survive. For the first time in weeks, she felt a spark of hope. She wasn't just surviving, she was fighting back. But then came the man. He was tall and neatly dressed, an unusual sight in the chaotic market. Ayomide first noticed him watching her from a distance, his kind eyes following her movements. He didn't seem like a typical customer, and that made her wary. When he finally approached, Ayomide's heart raced. "I see you here every day," he said, kneeling to her level. "You work hard. What's your name?" Ayomide didn't answer. She clutched her toys tightly and stared at him, her mind replaying every warning Toby had ever given her about strangers. Was he truly kind, or was he another danger disguised in clean clothes and a warm smile? The man introduced himself as Ayomide, explaining that he worked with an organization that helped children like her. He said they could provide her with food, shelter, and an education. But Ayomide's trust had been shattered too many times. Femi's betrayal had taught her that even family could destroy you, so how could she believe a stranger? What would you do if someone offered you a way out of darkness? Could you trust them? Or would fear hold you back? Ayomide told Ayomide she needed time to think, though her instinct was to run. He handed her a small card with a number and an address, promising he would return the next day if she wanted to talk. She watched him leave, her fingers trembling as she held the card. Was this her chance to escape the streets? Or was it a trap that would lead her into something even worse? That night, Ayomide sat in her corner, staring at the stars. Her life had been nothing but betrayal and hardship, yet for the first time, she felt the weight of a choice. Could she risk trusting someone again, or should she keep fighting alone? The question gnawed at her as the city buzzed around her, oblivious to the storm brewing inside her heart. Ayomide extended a hand that Ayomide hesitated to take. For months, she had learned to survive by trusting no one. Kindness, in her world, always came with strings attached. But something in Ayyomide's eyes, calm, steady, and patient, chipped away at her defenses. He didn't rush her. He didn't demand anything. He simply said, "You deserve a chance." The decision wasn't easy. Would you have taken that chance, or would fear of another betrayal hold you back? Ayomide wrestled with this question as she stood on the edge of the unknown. But her hunger for a better life, for a future beyond the streets, won out. She took his hand. The rehabilitation center was nothing like she expected. Clean beds, warm meals, and walls that didn't threaten to collapse felt alien to her. For the first few days, Ayomide flinched at every sudden noise, hiding food in her pockets out of habit. The structure overwhelmed her. Meals at set times, curfews, and rules about everything. It was like trying to learn a new language. The other girls seemed so different from her. They laughed freely, some of them even daring to dream about their futures. Ayomide felt like an outsider, still carrying the grime of the streets on her spirit. Could she ever truly belong here? Or was she destined to remain an outcast, no matter where she went? But Ayomide was resilient, a survivor in the truest sense. Slowly, she began to adapt. The centre's staff, particularly Ayomide, noticed her sharp mind and quick thinking. When she struggled with reading, a tutor stepped in, patiently guiding her until the letters on the page started to make sense. Mathematics, once a confusing jumble of numbers, became a game she was determined to master. Her breakthrough moment came during a group activity. The girls were tasked with designing a project to solve a community problem. Ayomide, initially reluctant, proposed an idea to recycle waste into usable materials. The staff was impressed, not just by her creativity, but by her ability to think critically about solutions. For the first time, Ayomide saw herself as more than a survivor. She saw herself as someone capable of creating change. Months turned into a year, and Ayomide's progress was nothing short of extraordinary. She earned top marks in her classes, often outshining even those who had been in formal education for years. Her determination caught the attention of an organization offering scholarships to underprivileged students. Ayomide applied, pouring her heart into the essay required for the application. The question lingered in her mind as she waited for the results. Could this be the turning point? Or would her past rise up to overshadow her efforts? The day the scholarship results were announced was one she would never forget. She was called into the office, where Ayomide waited with a letter in hand. Her heart pounded as he smiled and said, "You did it, Ayomide. You won." The scholarship was her golden ticket to a prestigious secondary school, an opportunity to rebuild her life entirely. For a moment, she allowed herself to dream again. But what about the shadows of her past? Could she outrun them, or were they already catching up to her? Now, think about it. If you were in Ayomide's shoes, would you believe this was the end of your struggles? Or would you brace yourself for what might come next? Ayomide's journey from the harsh streets to a structured environment was anything but smooth, but she embraced every opportunity with a fierce determination. Her teachers quickly recognized her potential, and her natural brilliance began to shine. In just a few years, she was not just excelling in her studies, but also emerging as a leader among her peers. Her resilience became her badge of honor, and others couldn't help but be inspired by her story. Word spread about Ayomide's academic prowess. She was the girl who came from nowhere and was now at the top of her class. Teachers often spoke about her dedication, her unwavering focus, and her hunger for knowledge. Her classmates admired her too, though some envied her. Ayomide, however, stayed grounded. She knew what it was like to feel invisible, to be dismissed as unworthy. Instead of basking in her achievements, she reached out to other struggling students, helping them with their studies and encouraging them to dream big. But Ayomide didn't stop there. She started volunteering at shelters where she met children who reminded her of herself years ago, hungry, hopeless, and yearning for a way out. She shared her story with them, not to boast, but to show that no situation is permanent. If I could rise above the streets, she would say, so can you. If I could rise above the streets, she would say, so can you. You just need to believe in yourself. Little by little, she became a symbol of hope for those who had given up. Then, an opportunity came that could change everything. Ayomide's school received an invitation to participate in a national science competition. The prize? A full scholarship to any university of the winner's choice. For Ayomide, this wasn't just a competition. It was a chance to secure her future and prove to herself that she belonged among the best. Her teachers encouraged her to participate, and deep down, she knew this was her moment. but doubt began to creep in. Could she compete against students who had always had access to the best resources, the best education, and a life free from the struggles she had faced? Ayomide's past haunted her. Memories of being hungry, cold, and alone whispered to her that she might never truly belong in a world of privilege. What if she failed? What if her story of triumph turned into a story of humiliation? As the competition approached, Ayomide threw herself into her preparation. She spent hours poring over textbooks, practicing experiments and solving equations late into the night. But the pressure weighed on her. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was still that girl who had been abandoned, a girl who wasn't meant to succeed. Would her past define her future? Could she rise above the doubts and fears to claim the opportunity she so desperately wanted? Or would her self-doubt hold her back at the most critical moment? What do you think Ayomide should do? Should she let her fears consume her, or should she remember how far she's come and give it her all? Ayomide's name was now synonymous with hope, resilience, and triumph. Her face, once hidden in the shadows of Lagos's streets, was now beaming from every television and newspaper in Nigeria. Interviews celebrated her journey from a destitute child to a national icon, a voice for the voiceless, and an advocate for street children. Everywhere she went, people recognized her. Her story was inspiring millions, but it was also reaching ears she had hoped never to hear it. The voice on the other end froze her. It was unmistakable. Femi, her uncle, the man who had sold her life away as if she were nothing more than a commodity. "Oh, Ayomide, my dear, look at what you've become," his voice oozed with feigned warmth. "I've been watching you on TV, such a powerful woman now. I always knew you'd make something of yourself." Her chest tightened. For years she had imagined this moment, yet nothing could have prepared her for the emotions surging through her. Anger, confusion, and an old buried ache. "I don't think you called to congratulate me, Uncle Femi," she replied, her voice steady but cold. "What do you want?" He hesitated, then sighed, launching into a tale of his desperation back then. He painted himself as a victim of circumstances, a widowed man with no means to care for another child. "I had no choice, Ayomide," he pleaded. "I regret it every single day. You must understand. It was a mistake, but I did it out of love. I knew the streets would toughen you up." Her hand trembled as she gripped the phone. Love? Was this man really trying to justify selling her into misery? Her mind raced with conflicting emotions. A part of her wanted to scream at him, to expose him to the world for the heartless man he was. But another part, a small, reluctant voice, wondered if perhaps there was a chance for closure, for peace. What would you do? Could you forgive someone who had thrown your life away? Or would you seek revenge, ensuring they could never hurt another soul? Femi's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Ayomide, I need your help. I'm not well. I've fallen on hard times. You're my only family. Please help me." She hung up without saying another word. For days, his call haunted her. During interviews and public appearances, his voice echoed in her mind. When she met the children she was helping, she saw herself in their eyes, vulnerable, betrayed, and desperate for someone to believe in them. She couldn't reconcile the man who had done this to her with the pitiful voice on the phone. One morning she stood before a mirror, preparing for a live TV appearance. As the makeup artist touched up her face, Ayomide made a decision. The world needed to know the truth, not just about her success, but about the pain and betrayal that had fueled it. If Femi wanted her help, it would come on her terms, and the price would be accountability. The interview aired live. With calm but resolute words, Ayomide recounted her story in full, naming Femi as the man who had sold her. He claims he acted out of desperation, she told the interviewer, her voice steady. But desperation doesn't justify destroying a child's life. I have forgiven him in my heart, but forgiveness doesn't erase the truth. The audience was stunned. Social media exploded with debates. Some viewers sympathized with Femi, while others condemned him without mercy. And Ayomide? She felt lighter, as though a weight she had carried for years was finally gone. Femi called again after the interview, his voice filled with anger and desperation. "Why would you humiliate me like this?" he demanded. "Because the world needs to know what betrayal looks like," Ayomide replied. "And because the children who are still out there need to know that their pain matters, that someone will fight for them. You will face the consequences of your actions, Femi. That's not humiliation, that's justice." The call ended, but Ayomide felt a quiet sense of closure. She had reclaimed her story. What about you? If you were Ayomide, would you forgive, forget, or fight for justice? Let me know in the comments. Ayomide sat on the stage, the bright studio lights bearing down on her, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Across from her, Femi squirmed in his chair, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. The audience sat in tense silence, their eyes darting between the two. The cameras rolled, capturing every flicker of emotion on Ayomide's face. The interviewer began softly, recounting Ayomide's remarkable journey. From the streets to the top of your field, your story is nothing short of extraordinary. But today, we delve into the shadows of your past. Ayomide, you've asked to address someone very specific here. Ayomide drew a deep breath, her gaze steady. Yes, I'm here to talk to the man who sold me into despair when I was only 13, my uncle, Femi. Her voice didn't waver, though her grip on her hands tightened. A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Femi's head jerked up. He tried to muster a smile, but it came out twisted. I didn't know how else to survive, Ayomide. It was desperation. Desperation? Ayomide interrupted, her voice sharp but controlled. You didn't just betray me, Femi. You stole my future and left me to the mercy of strangers. Did you think I wouldn't remember? Did you think I wouldn't survive? The audience sat frozen, the tension palpable. Femi stuttered, searching for words. I thought you'd be better off. I had no money to care for you. Better off? Ayomi's voice rose, filled with years of pent-up emotion. You didn't send me to safety. You sold me to people who treated me worse than an animal. You were my only family, and you abandoned me. She paused, letting her words sink in. But I didn't just survive, Femi. I thrived. And now I'm here to ensure no one else suffers because of you. The audience erupted in applause, but Ayomide raised her hand, signaling for silence. I'm not here for revenge, she continued, her voice softer now, but no less powerful. Because revenge would mean I'm still chained to the pain you caused. I'm here to forgive you, but not to excuse you. Femi's eyes widened. Forgive? He whispered, his voice cracking. Yes, Ayomide said firmly, because I refuse to carry the weight of your betrayal anymore. But forgiveness doesn't mean you escape justice. She turned to the camera. The world deserves to know what kind of man you are. You've hurt others, haven't you, Femi? Taken advantage of those who trusted you. Femi opened his mouth to protest, but Ayomide's piercing gaze silenced him. The interviewer interjected, revealing records Ayomide had uncovered of Femi's illegal dealings, proof that her uncle's greed had destroyed more lives than hers. Femi buried his face in his hands, the weight of his actions finally sinking in. Ayomide turned back to the audience. I've learned that true strength isn't in holding on to anger. It's in letting go while ensuring justice is served. My story doesn't end with pain, it begins with hope. The studio was silent for a beat before applause erupted again, this time thunderous. Ayomide's eyes glistened, but she stood tall, unbroken. As the cameras panned over the scene, Ayomide addressed the audience one last time. What would you do in my place? Would you forgive? Or would you seek revenge? Is forgiveness the ultimate revenge, or does justice demand more? Let me know your thoughts. And remember, our past doesn't define us. It shapes us for the future. The show ended with Ayomide walking off the stage, her head held high. Behind her, Femi remained seated, his world unraveling under the weight of truth. Ayomide's story is a testament to resilience and the power of determination. Betrayed, abandoned, and left to survive the unimaginable, she rose above her circumstances to become a beacon of hope for others. But her journey also raises important questions for all of us. What would you do in her shoes? Could you forgive such a betrayal, or would you let anger consume you? Let us know in the comments, and remember, no matter how dark life may seem, there's always a way to rise again. Make sure to subscribe, like and share to hear more inspiring stories like Ayomide's, and stay tuned for our next tale of courage and triumph.